Hi, everyone. I would like you to meet Steve. This is Steve. This isn't his real picture, of course, but Steve is a real person. He is a mathematician. He knows a lot about cryptography. He has a PhD in graph theory. He's now 54 years old, and he lives in Staffordshire, England, near Birmingham. Steve works as a software engineer, and because he's really good at his job, he actually doesn't exactly work only 9 to 5. And because he also really likes the field that he's in, he has a little open source project that he started on the side a few years ago. And this project took only a little bit of time at first, but then, hundreds of projects started using it, then thousands, and finally now it's in the hundreds of millions of projects. So Steve is really busy with this project. He has a collaborator. After a few years, he got a collaborator, and his name was also Steve Marquez. So together, they became later known as the Two Thieves. Now, in 2012, a student from the University of Münster in Germany created a pull request. Steve reviewed it, and he decided to include the code into the code base. It was only in 2014 that they found out that with this pull request, a crucial bug was introduced into the system that caused the largest breach in online security in the history of humankind. And that's not an exaggeration. It really created a lot of problems. And it led to funny headlines like this here: the internet is being protected by two guys named Steve. So it was head on, right? It was these two guys. And now you probably have heard of the project that they were working on. It was called OpenSSL, and the bug became known as the Heartbleed bug. Now, it was only then that people started investigating who are these guys that are maintaining this project, and they found the Two Thieves. It turned out the Two Thieves are doing this as a project purely in their free time, and it took up more and more of their time, and they became these really overworked, underpaid guys who were taking care of our online security. Now, you've all seen this picture. I really like it, though. It just depicts the situation in software so good. You have a lot of times you have the situation where one project builds upon the other, and then you end up in a situation like this where everything is based on this one little piece of software, and if you take that off, then it all comes crashing down, and we'll spend a lot of time reassembling civilization from the rubble. Another project that you probably have heard of is Log4Shell. That is very recent. And that was a similar situation, except the maintainers were three guys, and they didn't have all the same name. They were called Matt, Gary, and Ralph. And Ralph Gores is the project lead for Log4j, and he works on this on top of a full-time job. Clearly, this situation isn't very sustainable and is not very good. What can we do? Well, so some people suggested not to use open source at all. Obviously, we don't need to discuss this. And some people suggested, hey, we should have a central governing unit in every company that takes care of okaying the open source software that we use. Now that you can do this, but I think I have a few better ideas. So here's one: contribute. Please go and contribute to open source projects. Please aim for high quality contributions. Because these maintainers already have a lot on their plate. And please don't let this remark keep you from doing first-time contributions, but just be diligent about it. Better yet, become a maintainer yourself, because it turns out that the number of open pull requests was never a problem for the Two Thieves. They had about 200 open pull requests lying around at any time. So, but they were the bottlenecks, basically. Being a maintainer would have really helped them. I realize you can't be a maintainer for every open source project, but give it a thought. If you really use it a lot, try to help out there. Another thing here is become a member of a software foundation or an open source foundation. Like, for example, we at Mercedes-Benz, we are members of the Eclipse Foundation. We're members of the Linux Foundation and several others. So these foundations, they do a really good job for open source software. And here's one more idea, and that's basically the point of this talk here. Consider funding and sponsoring open source projects. It probably seems a bit far-fetched that for-profit companies would spend money on something that they actually get for free. But I can tell you that we at Mercedes-Benz are doing exactly that. So we started about a year ago, and we're now paying money 2 open source projects that we like. So for example, here, if you go to our GitHub site, you can see this. Right now it's 34 organizations and developers. Some we did sponsor before, they're not included in this number anymore, and we keep adding more and more to this. So how can you do this? There are several possibilities. So the first one here is GitHub sponsors. We're at GitHub Universe, so that's how we do it at Mercedes-Benz. So right now, by the way, they're still in a phase where they don't charge any fees. It will later be chargeable. They will not make any profit off of this. So this is the fees that they will ask is just going to be to cover the costs for the program on their side. As I said, we're at GitHub Universe. We prefer GitHub sponsors at the moment. I just want to, for completeness reasons, show you that there are other ways. One here, so Open Collective, Open Source Collective. I think that is also a good viable option. They take 10% on incoming funds. Then Linux Foundation crowdfunding, I think that's a good way too. They don't ask for any fees for the first 10 million, and then 5% after that. And here, these are smaller ones. I don't know them personally, but just for completeness here, LibrePay, Bounty Source, Stay Social, Tidelift, Issue Hunt, or Excess Code. So how does this work in practice? We give money to GitHub, then the money is at GitHub, and then we tell GitHub who that we want to sponsor. So we can select individual developers, or we can select projects. To set this up in your company can be a bit tricky. It took me quite a while actually to figure this out, and I wasn't procrastinating, but let me run you through this for real quick. So you have to know a company can't just spend money like that, you know. You either spend money when you buy something, so it's a purchase, or you do traditional sponsoring. For example, so at Mercedes, we might sponsor a famous sports person, you know, to wear our logo on their sleeve, you know, and then they're our name ambassadors and they get money for that. What is open source sponsorship? It's really neither 100% this nor 100% that. It's sort of in the middle. Because, I mean, are you buying something? Well, not really. Are you sponsoring someone for wearing your logo? Also not really, right? So you could justify that it's a purchase. You could justify that it's a sponsoring. It doesn't really matter in the end. You just have to decide at your company which way you want to go, okay? And that will, let me tell you, this will require a lot of talking to the sponsoring people, to the purchasing people, you know, just get everyone together and sort of figure out how you can do this, okay? An important point that I want to make here is you have to pay heed to compliance, because you can't just give money to someone. At big companies, you want to know where that money goes. And you know, to give money to someone on the internet that you don't know really who they are is you can't do that. You want to make sure that your money doesn't end up in strange places where you don't want it to be. So that means we at Mercedes-Benz, and I think that's pretty much the same at every big company, you have to know their name and residence so you can do a sanction list check as mini background check basically. And everybody does this, so this is not a secret thing or anything. But you need their name and residence. So I went to GitHub and said, GitHub, can you please give me the names and residences of these people? I want to sponsor them, or you want to sponsor them. And then GitHub said, no, sorry, we can't do that. Why? Because of data protection laws. And we told them, you know, we're not giving away their information, and obviously we understand that. So, okay, fine. So that means I had to approach these people personally and say, hey, can I please have your name and address, because we want to give you money. So all of a sudden, I was this guy sending emails to people, hey, we want to give you money, can you please give me information? You know, and so that felt a little weird. I was like, oh, wow, good. But in the end, actually, that worked out. I guess sending an official email from an official Mercedes-Benz address and so forth, and I stated to them exactly why I needed it and so forth, you know. So it worked out in the end. So here's some of the feedback that we got. We got really, really good feedback from the community. And it's not so much just because we gave them money. People tend to be happy when you give them money. But it was, I think a lot of it was more, it was the recognition the pat on the shoulder, the thank you that you do this great work. It was a nice experience. And just one example, we wanted to sponsor someone. They didn't have a GitHub sponsor profile set up yet. So we asked them, hey, we would like to sponsor you. Can you please set up this with GitHub? And then this particular project, they did this. And then we were able to sponsor them. And then a few months later, they wrote back to us and said, hey, thank you so much for asking us to do this. Since you sponsored us, since we set up the profile, 20 more people and organizations have sponsored us. So that was really good. Okay, guys, let me just wrap this up here. I wanted to give you, this is our open source landing page. It's still fairly new, not super much on there yet, but enough for you to browse through some articles, some of the projects that we have as open source. There is our Mercedes-Benz FOSS Manifesto. I would like to point that out because this is the Mercedes-Benz FOSS Manifesto is our commitment to open source. And it states that we don't only want to be passive open source consumers, but that we want to be active in open source. We ask our engineers, please go out there and please become active in open source. Not only use, also contribute, also publish your own projects as open source. I hope I have inspired you. Think about whether you and your company can maybe sponsor open source projects. If more and more of us do it, we really can change the world. We can really make a difference because it supports and fosters open source. It helps to ensure that the projects that we like are still around tomorrow, and because it's the right thing to do. All right, thanks very much for listening. See you later.